few weeks ago, I set out on a trip to the Appalachian Mountains. I'm 35 now, and I was struggling to find my next big project. I thought exploring local folklore and ghost stories might inspire me. I packed my gear and headed into the hills. The mountains were beautiful, with rolling hills and thick forests, but it was the stories that pulled me in. I found an overgrown cemetery and wandered inside. The air felt thick, like something was watching me. I snapped photos of the old stones and the twisted trees. Then I came across a grave marker with a date that matched a local legend about a spirit that wouldn't move on. As I pressed the shutter, a chill ran down my spine. I felt uneasy but brushed it off. I told myself it was just my imagination. The next few days felt normal, or so I thought. The cemeteries were peaceful, but soon strange things started happening. I heard whispers when I was alone. I felt cold spots even in warm weather. The locals gave me odd looks when I asked about the spirits. Their stories didn't always agree. I felt like maybe they were hiding something. Was I losing my grip on reality, or was there something more to it? One day, I visited a forgotten cemetery. The grass was so high, it looked like it wanted to swallow the headstones. I felt a bit on edge, but I didn't think much of it until I heard it. A distant voice calling my name. I thought my mind was playing tricks, but the voice called again. I turned around, expecting to see someone behind me. But there was nobody, just trees swaying softly. My fingers trembled as I held my camera. Why had I thought this would be a good idea? That feeling of being watched returned, but I shook it off. That evening, I went through my photos. The images looked fine, but the voices haunted me. Every time I left a cemetery, the coldness clung to my skin. Did I tap into something real? I hesitated but decided I had to go back. Just one more visit, I told myself. I arrived at another cemetery feeling nervous. It was late afternoon. The shadows were long and twisted. As I stepped between the stones, I heard it again, a whisper right in my ear. "You're not done yet." I felt my heart race. Panic set in. I didn't look around, I just ran. I sprinted through the grass, the feeling of eyes on my back strong. I wasn't just chasing a story anymore. Something wanted me there. I stumbled through the trees, my mind racing. I couldn't shake that voice. I didn't understand what I had uncovered, but I knew I had to get away. I didn't look back until I reached my car, gasping for air. The mountains felt alive, watching me leave. I don't think I'll return. I may never understand what happened, but something in those cemeteries knows I was there, and it still whispers my name. I spent the next few days at my rented cabin, pacing and trying to make sense of everything. The whispers replayed in my mind like a haunting melody. I felt drained, but a part of me couldn't let it go. Curiosity gnawed at me. Should I try to confront whatever was happening? Or should I stay far away from the haunting landscape that seemed to possess me? I decided to do a little digging. I found a local library that had archives about the area's folklore. I thought I could uncover something, anything, to help me understand what I experienced. The library smelled musty. Dust danced in the beams of sunlight filtering through the windows. I asked the librarian about stories of restless spirits trying to act casual. She raised an eyebrow, but her eyes sparked with interest. She showed me to a small room filled with old books and newspapers. I settled into a corner and began to sift through the material. Most of it was typical ghost stories, but one article caught my eye. It was about a family that vanished in the mountains over a century ago. Their home had burned down, and it was said they had never been found. My heart raced. Was this connected to the whispers? As I read further, the details felt eerily familiar. A similar date was mentioned, the same one I found on the grave marker. My stomach churned. Was it possible that the spirit I had stumbled upon was tied to this family? I had to know more. After hours in the library, I left with a few copies of the articles and a massive pit in my stomach. I returned to the cabin, feeling a mix of dread and determination. The whispers were still echoing, but now they felt more personal. They belonged to someone. I had to confront this spirit, delve deeper into the mystery. That night I laid awake, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the cabin made me jump. I finally couldn't take it. I grabbed my camera and headed out into the dark. I felt like I was crossing a line I shouldn't have. The cold air bit at my skin, but I pressed on. I walked back to the overgrown cemetery, drawn by something I couldn't name. The moon hung low, casting eerie shadows. I felt the weight of the night around me, thick and suffocating. I stepped between the stones, where I had felt the heavy presence before. The hairs on the back of my neck rose and my heart raced as I called out softly, "Is anyone here?" Nothing answered but the rustle of leaves. I took a breath, fighting my fear. "I want to help. Why are you still here?" Just then, the air shifted. My breath fogged in front of me. "You're not done yet," the voice said again, closer this time. It was unmistakable. My heart hammered in my chest. I spun around, but I was alone. This wasn't just a whisper. It was a demand. Something was waiting for me to uncover the truth. I felt the earth shift beneath my feet, panic bubbling up. This wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was personal. I turned to leave, but the chill in the air intensified. I could sense something shifting in the dark. That's when I saw it. A shape by one of the stones, indistinct and shadowy. My breath caught in my throat. I was not alone. I froze, staring at the shadow. It flickered, then solidified into a more defined shape. The silhouette of a figure cloaked in darkness. My heart raced in a wild cadence, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. Some unseen force kept me rooted to the spot. The air grew colder, thick with an electric tension. "You see me," it whispered, the voice echoing in my mind. Fear clamped down like a vice. "Why do you linger?" I want to help you," I stammered, forcing the words out. "What do you need?" The figure beckoned, a gloved hand reaching toward me, as if trying to draw me close. "Find them," it urged, voice trembling like the rustle of leaves. "Before it's too late." I gulped, trying to comprehend its words. "Who?" I asked, confusion mixing with my terrified curiosity. "Family. Lost." It whispered again, now barely audible, like a breath carried on the wind. Then, just as quickly, the figure began to dissolve into the night, its form distorting like smoke. Panic washed over me, the realization that I might never have another chance to understand. "Wait!" I called out, stepping forward instinctively, but there was only silence. I stood there, heart pounding, the darkness thickening around me. I knew I had to act. I needed to uncover more about the family this spirit had mentioned. The librarian had hinted at old records. Their history could be key. Turning back toward my cabin, I felt a sense of urgency building. I picked up my pace, retracing my steps, while replaying that brief interaction in my mind. The instructions were clear. Find them. Who were they? And why did they remain tethered to this place? As I returned, past the overgrown grass and the stone markers jutting out like jagged teeth, an unsettling thought crept in. Could this be more than a ghost story? Were there darker forces at play? I swept my flashlight across the ground, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. Once inside the cabin, I turned on my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed in the family's name. An obsession gripped me. I had to know everything, how they died, if they had left behind anything that could connect them to the graveyard. As I scrolled through articles, several names popped up. I collected them, jotting down dates, locations, and any connection I could find. But as I pieced together the fragments of their story, My stomach dropped. Just as I reached the end of my research, a chilling thunder sounded outside, rattling the cabin. I paused, my breath hitching. The world outside felt unnervingly still. And then, vibrating through the silence, came a low whisper, echoing off the walls like an ominous invitation. "Come find us." I glanced toward the window, but saw only reflections staring back at me. My heart thudded. What was happening? I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were closing in again. I had started this journey looking for answers, but now it felt like the truth was clawing its way to the surface, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what I might find next. The next morning, I woke feeling restless. The weight of that ghostly figure had pressed down on me all night, invading my dreams with shadows and whispers. I had to push through the unease. I needed answers, and there was only one place to start. At the graveyard. After grabbing my notebook, I drove back to the worn stones jutting out from the ground like ancient sentinels. The sun hung high, washing everything in a bright light that didn't seem to match my apprehension. Walking among the tombstones, I felt a chill, a reminder that this space held secrets waiting to be uncovered. I pulled out the names I had scribbled down and began scanning the headstones. Each name seemed to thrum with energy. I could almost hear them calling out, desperate to tell their story. I found the first name, engraved in weathered stone, Henry Caldwell. Below it, the dates confirmed he had died young, just barely past his teenage years. But there was something else, an inscription that sent shivers down my spine. Lost in the woods, seeking what is hidden. What could that mean? I turned it over in my mind, pondering what he might have been searching for. Could it relate to the shadow I had seen? My heart raced at the possibility. I continued down the line, matching names with graves. With each discovery, my pulse quickened. Then I came upon a grave that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was unmarked but surrounded by wilted flowers, fresh enough to suggest recent visits. Anxiety festered in me. Who buried flowers here? As I knelt down, trying to wipe away leaves and dirt for a better look, I heard a snapping branch behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, but saw no one. Only the wind rustling through the trees. I shook my head, scolding myself. It was just me, I assured myself. Just my imagination working overtime. But try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A heavy dread sank in as I looked back at the grave, feeling someone was waiting for me. I hurried back to my research. Once at home, I dug deeper into the Caldwell family. Hours melted away as I flipped through old newspaper clippings and documents. They told of a tragic accident, an entire family lost in a fire, their names forever linked with mysteries that had begun long before that night. Something struck me then. I found mention of a legend associated with their home, talk of a treasure hidden nearby, a secret left untold. It said they had been searching for it the day of the blaze. Could this treasure tie into what the shadow had asked of me? That's when I heard it, a soft thumping against my cabin door. My heart dropped. There shouldn't be anyone here. Swallowing back my fear, I crept to the door, dread pooling in my stomach. I could feel whatever it was beyond that door, and I knew I had to face it. I took a deep breath and turned the doorknob, ready to step into whatever awaited me. As the door creaked open, I squinted through the daylight, and there, on the porch, was a small box. I stared at the small box, its wooden surface worn and etched with symbols I didn't recognize. It rested innocently on my porch, almost mocking my unease. I leaned down and brushed my fingers over its surface, feeling the grain beneath my fingertips. The box felt heavier than it looked, and the air around me thickened, buzzing with an inexplicable tension. I hesitated, recalling the chilling encounter at the graveyard and the shadowy figure's gaze. A shiver chased down my spine, reminding me of the stories I had uncovered about the Caldwell family. Had it led me here? I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting something or someone to be lurking in the trees. The box seemed to call to me, but the anxiety clawed at my guts. I could just leave it there, I told myself. I could walk away. But the unanswered questions loomed larger. What if this box held the key to the mystery I had stumbled upon? What if it was what Henry Caldwell had sought after so desperately? With a deep breath, I scooped up the box, the wood cool against my palms. I carried it inside and shut the door behind me, sealing the outside world away for a moment. I placed it on the dining table, where the sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My heart raced as I prepared to open it. There was no latch or lock, just a simple flap that begged to be lifted. The anticipation was unbearable. My fingers trembled slightly as I managed to get the flap open, revealing the contents inside. As I peered in, confusion washed over me. The box was filled with small, finely crafted trinkets, each one a charm that appeared to capture a moment, a memory, or perhaps a wish. A wooden bird carved with such precision, a small compass that still turned despite not having a glass face, and a crumpled piece of paper inscribed with hurried notes. I pulled out the paper first, my eyes racing over the scrawl. It was a list, jotted down hastily, detailing places in the woods surrounding my cabin. My pulse quickened with every name I deciphered. Old trails, hidden streams, and the one that made my stomach drop, the Willow Creek Cave. That cave. I'd heard whispers about it. Legend spoke of those who entered, never to return, searching for the treasure the Caldwell family sought. A sense of impending dread washed over me. I couldn't ignore the coincidence that all paths seemed to lead back to Henry Caldwell. Then, as I continued rummaging through the box, I felt a shift in the air, a prickling sensation crawling up my neck. I glanced back toward the window. The light seemed to fade slightly, shadows lengthening unnaturally. A whisper echoed in my mind, a phrase I couldn't quite catch but felt deeply. Find it before it finds you. Before I could process this unsettling thought, an ice-cold draft rushed through the room. The door rattled as if something were trying to push its way inside. Panic surged through me. I bolted upright, heart hammering, nails digging into the edge of the table. I was not alone. The faint sound of footsteps creaked on the porch. I couldn't shake this feeling that whatever had brought me here was now closing in. A desperate need to know the truth clawed at me, but so did the urge to run. What had I unearthed? And who or what was on the other side of that door? I stood frozen in the dining room, my breath caught in my throat. The footsteps grew louder, deliberate and measured, as if the unseen visitor planned to make a grand entrance. The sound echoed in my ears, punctuating the stillness. I glanced down at the box, feeling a mix of betrayal and fascination. What had I just discovered, and what was its connection to the figure lurking outside? My instincts screamed at me to move, to hide, but curiosity anchored me to that spot. The doorknob began to turn, and I instinctively ducked down behind the table, heart racing. I couldn't see who it was, but I felt every nerve in my body snap to attention, waiting for a reveal I feared might come. The creaking door swung open, and the shadows danced in, stretching long across the floorboards. "Hello?" a voice called. It was shaky but unmistakably familiar. That was my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. I breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. The back of my mind reminded me that her arrival only added layers to this already strange situation. "Mrs. Henderson," I called out, standing slowly. "What are you doing here?" She stepped inside, brushing a hand through her white hair. "I saw some unusual lights coming from your place earlier. Thought I'd check in on you." She looked over my shoulder at the box on the table, and I shifted to block her view. "Everything's fine, just exploring some old stuff." I attempted to sound casual, but the tremor in my voice gave me away. Her gaze sharpened. You shouldn't be messing with things you don't understand. I know that box. It belonged to the Caldwells, didn't it? My heart sank again as I realized how little I knew. What do you mean? She hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. It holds old secrets, and not all of them are safe. If you've found that box, you've opened a door to things best left closed. What had I disturbed? I could feel the weight of her warning pressing down on me. What happened to Henry Caldwell? I asked, almost impulsively. Mrs. Henderson frowned, fear flickering in her eyes. Nobody knows what happened to him. Some say he searched for something in the Willow Creek cave and never returned. Others whisper that he found something darker. Her words struck a chord deep within me. The whisper I had heard earlier echoed in my mind. Find it before it finds you. If Henry's search led him to doom, then perhaps mine would too. Just then, a soft noise startled us both. A faint thud from the back of the cabin cut through the tension. It sounded like something heavy had shifted. Mrs. Henderson, did you hear that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned pale, gripping the edge of the table. You need to leave. Now. But before I could argue, the unmistakable sound of footsteps came again, louder this time, coming from the direction of the kitchen. A chill washed over me. Who, or what, was in my house? I glanced at the box one last time, its secrets beckoning, then turned to Mrs. Henderson just as the sound of breaking glass rang out. We need to go. Before I took another step, a figure emerged from the shadows of the corridor, its outline standing stark against the wall. Everything in me froze at the sight. I had to confront whatever truth lay ahead, but now it felt like fate itself had sealed the door. And that's when I realized I had walked right into something I couldn't escape. I stared at the figure as my heart raced in my chest. The outline was unclear, but it was tall and broad. The flickering light from the box cast distorted shadows, making it hard to distinguish its features. I blinked hard, hoping to make sense of what I saw, but it stood motionless, waiting. Who are you? I managed to croak, my voice trembling. The shape shifted slightly, its head tilting as if considering my question. I could hardly breathe, caught between fear and inexplicable curiosity. Mrs. Henderson clutched my arm, her grip tight and urgent. Get out of here now, she whispered frantically. Before I could reply, the figure took a step forward, and I saw it more clearly. It was a man, disheveled and gaunt. His eyes seemed sunken, shadows clinging to him like a second skin. I didn't recognize him, but something about his presence felt familiar, almost like a nightmare I couldn't shake off. Leave this place, he rasped, his voice hoarse, each word heavy with caution. It's not what you think. The warning sent adrenaline coursing through me. I glanced at Mrs. Henderson, who looked horrified, despite the fear etched into my own face. What do you know? I found my voice feeling strangely brave. Who are you? He took another step closer, and I caught a glimpse of something metallic glinting in his hand. My pulse quickened. You've uncovered a secret. Touching that box, it opens paths. Unseen paths, he said, his tone urgent. I wanted to ask more, but the chaos around me drowned my thoughts. Another crash echoed from the back of the house, more intense this time, rattling the walls. Clatter, shout, something else wanted to come through. Panic surged, threatening to choke me. Run! Mrs. Henderson yelled, pulling me toward the door. I stumbled after her, and that's when I felt the energy shift. The air was dense and charged, like static before a storm. I shot a glance back at the figure. What's coming? I shouted, desperate for answers. Something darker than you can imagine, he cried out, backing toward the shadows, his form flickering as he faded away. Before I could understand his words, Mrs. Henderson yanked me outside. We burst into the night, gasping for breath, leaving the chaos behind. The cool air stung my lungs. but it felt like a gift after the suffocating darkness of the cabin. "Did you see him?" I panted, struggling to grasp what had just occurred. "The Caldwells," she whispered hoarsely, looking back as if expecting him to follow. "They're bound to that box. He's a warning, and there could be worse." A chill gripped me as I looked back at my home. It loomed in the moonlight, a predator in the night. "We have to go back. I need to know," I blurted, determined despite the fear curling in the pit of my stomach. But just as I turned to bolt back inside, I spotted a faint glow coming from the windows. The box was glowing again, illuminating the walls with eerie brilliance. "No!" I shouted, panic clawing at my throat. Mrs. Henderson grabbed my arm. "We can't go back. It'll only get worse." That's when I heard the voice again, the sinister whisper that had called out before. "Find it before it finds you." With terror riding close behind, I knew this was only the beginning. I had opened a door, and now I could only wonder how long I had to find the key before it was too late. The darkness wrapped around us like a cloak as we stood outside the cabin. I felt Mrs. Henderson's grip tighten on my arm. "We can't linger here. We need to get away," she urged, glancing over her shoulder as if the house might decide to chase us. I hesitated, my eyes drawn back to the glowing windows. But what if someone else goes inside? My voice trembled. There was more at stake than just my curiosity. "Trust me, you don't want to know," she said, pulling me toward the road that led away from the property. The sounds of the forest filled the silence, a chorus of chirps and rustles, but it felt ominous, like the world was holding its breath. We walked fast, fear in every step. I couldn't shake off the image of the man. His words rattled in my head. "Unseen paths, darker than you can imagine." Something twisted inside me. I had to understand what he meant. "Where do you think he was from?" I asked, as we reached the end of my yard. "Do you think he was a ghost?" "No," she replied sharply. "He was a warning. We can't lose track of what's happening. The Caldwells paid the price for their curiosity." I didn't know much about the Caldwells, only that they had lived here before. But the name alone sent a shiver down my spine. I fought the urge to ask more as we continued onward, but my curiosity dug at me like a thorn. We reached the main road, the moonlight spilling onto the asphalt. I wanted to keep moving, to put distance between us and the chaos, but then I noticed something out of place on the ground. A glint caught my eye. I bent down and picked up a small object. It was a key, ornate and rusted, with an odd symbol etched into it. My heart raced when recognition hit. It was the same symbol that had been engraved on the box. "What did you find?" Mrs. Henderson turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw the key in my palm. "I don't know, but it feels important," I replied, a new thrill surging through me. The weight of the key was tangible, a piece of the puzzle waiting to be unlocked. "Don't you see? This is what they wanted," she exclaimed, her voice filled with urgency. "It's a trap. Whatever you do, don't go back." I felt a surge of defiance, but it might be the only way to understand. That's when we heard it. A rustling in the bushes nearby, too heavy to be a small animal. Something had followed us. My stomach dropped, and I turned slowly, heart hammering, ready to confront whatever was lurking behind the trees. "Stay back," I shouted, raising the key as if it were a weapon. The underbrush cracked again, and then I saw it. A shadowy outline stepped out from the trees. My breath hitched as recognition dawned. It was the same man from the cabin, but now he looked different, more menacing, more urgent. "Go back!" he shouted, pain etched across his gaunt face. "You don't understand what you've started." With every loop of dread tightening around me, I knew that the night was far from over. The answers I sought were closer than I ever imagined, but so were the dangers. And then another crash echoed from the cabin, far too loud and closer than before. My heart sank. Whatever had been unleashed was now free, and I had no idea what I was truly up against. The man stood before us, his shadow stretching long in the moonlight. His eyes held a frantic glimmer, like they were trying to pull me into a different reality. For a moment I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the ground. "Why are you warning us?" I stammered, astonishment mingling with fear. "What do you mean I've started something?" The man stepped closer, and the trees around us seemed to bend away, creating a small, stark space between us. "It's not just the key," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's what you're asking to unlock. The Caldwells. They tried to uncover secrets that weren't meant to be found. They died because of it. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Please." Mrs. Henderson pulled me back, cutting off his plea. "We need to go," she said, her tone brokering no argument. "We can't linger here." I felt the weight of the key in my hand. "But he knows something. What if—" "No," she hissed, eyes darting nervously to the cabin. "That crash sounded different. We're not safe." Before I could react, the man turned back toward the trees. "You don't understand. It'll find you, just like it found them. Don't be curious. Don't follow the paths." Suddenly, the air around us shifted, charged with an unsettling energy. The fluorescent light flickering from the cabin became more intense, casting eerie shadows that danced across the ground. A chill raked down my spine, and I knew something was coming. The man backed off, his figure melting into the shadows. I strained to catch a glimpse, desperately wanting to know more, to ask him what he meant about the paths. But then I remembered Mrs. Henderson's grip on my arm tightening once more, and instinct kicked in. "We should get to the car," I said, panic lacing my voice. We turned and sprinted down the road, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. Behind us, the cabin groaned as if it were alive, and the unsettling sounds that followed sent adrenaline coursing through me. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man or something worse creeping out of the trees. When we finally reached my car, I fumbled for my keys. I cursed under my breath as I dropped them, the metal clinking on the pavement. Mrs. Henderson was scanning the darkness, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. "Hurry, we need to get away from here now." Just as I retrieved the keys, another crash sounded. My heart raced as I threw myself into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered, and I stomped on the gas as we sped down the road, leaving the creeping shadows behind. As we drove, the thoughts buzzing in my mind were almost unbearable. What did he mean by paths? What happened to the Caldwells? Mrs. Henderson was quiet, staring out the window. He was right about one thing. "You've started something, but you need to promise me you won't dig deeper into this. There are places you can't go back from." But as the cabin faded from view in the rearview mirror, I knew the danger wasn't over. The key rested heavy in my pocket, pulsing with potential. I wasn't finished yet. Just as that thought settled in, I caught sight of something unusual near the edge of the woods. A path, faint but visible, beckoned from the gloom. My thoughts screamed caution, but my curiosity surged, and I felt a sudden dangerous pull, a whisper promising answers if only I dared to follow. I stared at the path just off the road, illuminated by the faint light of the moon. It wound its way deeper into the woods, twisting and turning as if it were alive. A yearning tugged at my gut, a voice whispering that this might be the answer I was searching for. I glanced at Mrs. Henderson, whose expression hardened as she spotted the trail. "No," she exclaimed, her voice laced with panic. "We can't go down that path. Do you understand what you're risking? If you step into the woods now, you may not come back out." But the pull of the trail was intoxicating. Part of me felt that whatever answers it held were worth the danger. The whispers, the shadowy figure, the mysteries tied to the Caldwell family, they were all intertwined, begging for discovery. "No, I need to explore," I said, despite the fear gnawing at me. "I've already opened this door. I can't stop now." I thought I could feel the key in my pocket glowing. It emanated warmth, almost as if it were aware of my internal struggle. I snuck a glance at Mrs. Henderson, who was still staring at the path, her face pale and tight. Think about Henry Caldwell. He never returned. Do you want to end up like him? Her voice trembled as she spoke, desperation spilling from her eyes. But I was already moving. I pushed open the car door, the cool night air rushing in. I can't leave this unanswered. I'll be quick. I promise. Don't you dare, she shouted, but I was already stepping onto the path wrapped in shadows. Once I began walking, the forest closed in around me, swallowing the sound of the road until it was just the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. An unsettling silence enveloped me, pressing down with a weight that felt unsettling. I glanced back, unsure if Mrs. Henderson was even still in the car, but I pressed on, fear morphing into excitement. The path wound deeper through the trees, twisting and turning until I felt like I was walking through a living maze. Shadowy fingers of branches reached out, but at every step instinct urged me forward, my heart thumping with an unusual rhythm. A part of me wondered if I was being led to discovery or danger. As I journeyed deeper, I began to see outlines of familiar shapes. Stones half buried by foliage, gnarled roots twisting up from the earth like fingers stretched toward the sky. I felt as though history waited here, veiled beneath layers of soil. Just then the air crackled again with unease. The shadows thickened, growing heavy, closing in tighter. I halted, feeling the cold breath of uncertainty on my neck. I could hear faint whispers rising all around me, although I couldn't quite decode their message. "You're not done yet," echoed the shadow's words, and dread spilled over. Then, as if responding to my fear, a figure emerged from the darkness, a transparent glimpse of a young man, eyes pleading and grave. It was Henry. With a deep breath, I stepped forward. "You were looking for something, weren't you?" I called out, every word filled with uncertainty. "What were you searching for?" The figure tilted slightly, as if considering my questions. "It is hidden. In the cave," he whispered, the words fading into the air like smoke. "Before it finds you, before it finds you, even if means finding me. Do you know?" I tried to ask more, but he flickered like a candle in the breeze, the light dimming. I felt consumed by an overwhelming sense of urgency. "Wait, please," I pleaded, stepping forward, but the figure dissipated into shadows, leaving me with nothing but the dim glow of the moon, marking the strange path ahead. An icy chill gripped my spine. I knew that whatever Henry had found, or had been searching for, it was close. I turned away from the fading light, gripping the key tightly as if it could anchor me. A few steps later I stumbled into a clearing, revealing a cavern's mouth, dark and jagged. The entrance resembled an ominous maw, waiting to swallow me whole. I hesitated, uncertainty flooding my mind again. Mrs. Henderson's warnings echoed. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, yet the unanswered question clung to me like a shadow. I had started this quest for answers, but now those answers may lead to more questions than I was ready to confront. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay within, whatever had drawn me into this journey, was more significant than just a ghost story. Clutching the key, I took a step toward the cave, where shadows danced in a symphony of echoes. I recalled Henry's warning, classic folklore entangled with dark truths. As I crossed the threshold, I breathed deeply, stepping into the unknown. It was silent inside, an eerie stillness wrapping around like a shroud. But all at once it felt alive, pulsing with the rhythm of untold stories. Every sense heightened, I advanced cautiously, heart pounding, mind racing. Perhaps this was where the paths converged, where the truths woven into whispers would unravel. But that chilling voice crept back in my mind, a reminder that there were things, ancient things, that should be left undisturbed. With each careful step, I listened intently for the truth. feeling the weight of the key pull me forward, deeper and deeper into the shadows, towards something long hidden, and something that might just lead me to the light, or consume me in darkness forever. The cave awaited,